Black Lolita is a blaxploitation takeoff on Lolita. Maybe you could guess that from the title, but could you guess that it was filmed in 3D? Well, if you saw the thumbnail, maybe, but otherwise, bit out of left field. This is not a drill. This movie was filmed in 3D, and you can watch it in 3D if you can find a copy. Good luck. It came out in 1975 or possibly in 1974. The details are a little bit hazy. It stars Yolanda Love, who is famous for appearing in nothing else. She does not appear to have a single other credit besides this movie. It was directed by Stephen Gibson. It was also written, produced, filmed, and edited by Stephen Gibson, who does not have a Wikipedia page. If you Google Stephen Gibson, you'll find a bunch of other people named Stephen Gibson. If you search Stephen Gibson on IMDb, this one does not come up. He does have a page. If you go to the Black Lolita page, you can find his profile, see that he's made a couple of other movies as well. But if you just search him, he did not show up for me, at least. This movie has 67 votes on IMDb, 67 votes, and is rated 5.6. So I think it's safe to assume you've probably already seen it. Before we go any farther, let me be clear that this is a terrible movie. I don't recommend it. It is also maybe an adult film. Whoops, that's not really the theme of the channel. But it wouldn't be the first one that has maybe snuck its way into one of these reviews. The film was re-released with a bit of additional footage under the title Wildcat Women. And when I started watching it and the opening credits came up, that's actually what it said. So it's possible I didn't watch Black Lolita at all. Apparently, they're different movies, but I'm not sure anybody is exactly clear on what the differences are. Maybe Steve knows. Honestly, I'm not sure if Stephen Gibson is alive. If you're watching this, hi, nice movie. Maybe give us some details about how it all went wrong. Obviously, this is kind of sleazy stuff. Wildcat Women. Like I said, borderline adult film. A lot of blaxploitation films can seem a little bit sleazy. To some, maybe that's part of the point or whatever. But this is on another level. And in fact, I'm not sure I'd even call this a blaxploitation film. If you're curious, I've reviewed quite a few at this point on the channel. It definitely has some hallmarks, but the film is so tepid and tentative that it feels kind of like a cheap knockoff of a blaxploitation film more than anything, like a blaxploitation film made by someone who had heard about blaxploitation films but never seen one, maybe read about one in a magazine. It's perhaps blaxploitation. Now, ironically, when I reviewed Black Shampoo on this channel, there's one of the films I've touched on in the past. That's a blaxploitation takeoff on Shampoo, which is a great movie, another movie I've reviewed. I wondered at the time whether the director had even bothered to watch the movie that he was referencing, or if it was just kind of a vague publicity stunt to draw people into the film based on a title that they might be somewhat familiar with. That is the case. At least Black Shampoo, though, involves a barbershop and even a barber. It's at least set in the same location. Actually, Shampoo, Black Shampoo, and Black Lolita all take place kind of in the very similar Los Angeles scenery. Lolita, notably, does not, but a minor detail. When it comes to Black Lolita, it seems like maybe the only thing Stephen Gibson knew about the source material was the title. Is this a takeoff on the book or the movie? I don't know. It seems like maybe he only knew what the title was. The movie features a character named Lolita. He's on the right track there, I guess. But that's the only thing in common that it has, the only thing it has in common with Lolita that we talked about last week. Black and white Lolita, if you will. Admittedly, I had been hoping to compare the two movies to make some insights about the differences, but that isn't going to happen. Partly because I'm not really even sure what happens in Black Lolita. The beginning is fairly straightforward. It shows a number of transgressions, crimes, heinous acts by some local criminal group, a gang, maybe you'd call it. Some of these take place against Lolita, some against her friends, some against her family members. Before long, Lolita decides she's going to seek revenge. She's a lounge singer at some kind of bar, by the way, but she knows martial arts quite well. And in some ways, this sort of strong woman character is something to look out for. But like I said, the movie is so tepid and tentative that it really doesn't go much of anywhere. Anyway, she decides she's going to take revenge along with some of her friends. This whole part, I mean, pretty straightforward. Makes sense. It's not good, but it's easy enough to follow. Once we get past about 20 minutes, though, the movie really becomes hard to keep track of. It's even a little bit hard to remember exactly who is who or who's on what side or what they're all doing, or I'm not sure. I think, realistically, if you really focused on the movie, took copious notes, you could probably straighten it out, but I wouldn't bother if I were you. Like I said, apparently there was more footage added to the movie to make it into Wildcat Woman. It's already quite short, if that's the thing that I watched. I'm not sure which parts were added, which is probably not a very good sign, but maybe that's one reason the film is so muddled, in addition to just a general amateurism surrounding the production. It is fairly clear when you watch this movie what the focus is, more probably on titillation than anything else. I will provide one piece of analysis about this movie, and only one, which I guess is that racial discord is particularly prominent in this movie. That's probably true to some extent about almost all blaxploitation movies, or many movies of the era. But here, I don't know, maybe there's something to say about it. The main gang in the film, the bad guys, are led by, I guess, a Japanese person who is nicknamed Buddha. And his relationship with his black henchman is strained at best. Maybe there's some implication here that crime and racial discord, not that kind of discord, go together. Okay. It's telling that the two women that Lolita is friends with are both white. The way that these two characters are imperiled in the movie echoes a sort of white racial panic. And that is part of the logic of this movie. I honestly don't know if Stephen Gibson is white, but I would assume so. This white racial panic is part of the logic of the movie, which really is kind of out of place. These relationships also seem to imply some sort of virtue in white society or something like that. What I'm really trying to say here is that this is just not a subversive movie in any way, which is a bit of a shame because most blaxploitation films are at least subversive in some way, even if they're also exploitative, even if they're maybe, not destabilizing overall, they have some subversive elements, but in Black Lolita, there's really just nothing there. This movie, it's hardly even a movie, is so diluted that it's not even provocative, which is sort of the number one virtue, maybe, of blaxploitation films. At the very least, they're supposed to be provocative. This really isn't even that. I would say maybe laughable would be a better term to describe it. I do actually have one more piece of analysis, which is that a number of the romantic scenes in the film involve these women, Lolita and her friends, or some other women whose identities I am a bit uncertain of, and very average men getting together. A janitor, for instance, is one of the guys, or a geeky scientist type who designs Bug. That character was probably heavily inspired by The Conversation, the Gene Hackman film, which came out in April of 1974. This movie, I guess, came out in February of 1974. I'm a little shaky on the dates. To me, these characters, the men in the film, not the criminals, but the men who get the chance to hook up with some of the ladies, they seem suspiciously similar to some of the people who might have gone to see this sleazy movie in theaters. The idea that a janitor might be minding his own business when a wildcat woman approaches and gives him the night of his life, I guess that is a particularly immersive idea for some people. Like I said, it's clear that this movie's main logic, probably the reason why it seems so amateurish in all other axes, is that it really is focused on arousal, I guess. And this idea of like, oh yeah, the janitor will get this surprise or whatever is just one example. Speaking of immersion, maybe you see exactly where the 3D fits with this film's proposition. A lot of blaxploitation films are known for having really kind of out there style. That's one of, I think, the main virtues of the entire genre, is that there's a lot of pretty radical style in the movies, interesting stuff that you wouldn't see many other places. This movie being in 3D, you might think for a moment, well, is that going to be some extension of that? Are we going to see like some really weird off-the-chain like 3D shots or some really interesting animation or something? And the answer is not really. The reason the 3D is there is pitched more as the same reason that people might make adult films using VR these days or something like that. Another level of immersion. There does not seem to be any artistic intent. This is the second 3D movie I have watched at home. The other one, can you guess? Came out in the 80s. Stars, who's in it? Michael Douglas, I think, maybe? Interesting cast. Not a very good movie. It's called The Final Countdown, about an aircraft carrier that goes through a wormhole. That was a real Hollywood production. Lots of resources behind that, not some homebrew thing. But even watching that at home really wasn't a great experience. I think there are some fundamental limits to this home 3D technology. I watched this movie with these things, and there's some drawbacks. For one thing, it's hard to multitask while watching one of these 3D movies. I usually take some notes when I watch movies for the channel, but when you're wearing 3D glasses, everything you look at that is not the movie looks pretty weird. If you've got other lights in the room or something like that, it's a bit weird. You got to be the right distance from the screen to get it to work best. This method is known as anaglyph 3D, by the way, and it's somewhat obvious how it works. Usually 2 cameras, and then the image from each is overlaid and tinted in a way that directs it to one eye. The basic concept is fairly straightforward, but you just get the feeling that doing it right actually involves some subtlety. There's a lot of variables at play here, a lot of things to tweak. Even The Final Countdown, which was a legit production, doesn't really look all that great. And you can assume they probably knew all the tricks, all the kinds of shots that you should use, all the ways to process the color. They probably knew just about everything you could know, and it still wasn't that great to watch it at home. Watching an anaglyphic film at home is nothing compared to seeing a film in theaters. A lot of legit systems, by the way, in theaters, for instance, use polarized light to direct different images to different eyes. The polarization of the different eyes is different. Pretty cool idea. Again, lots of technical depth to getting that to work. Honestly, even a 3DS might look better than red-blue glasses. The 3DS works with something called a parallax barrier. Anyway, you can see the limitations of the anaglyphic method very clearly in this movie, and also just the amateurism, the naivete of somebody trying to set out to do this without really having any expertise, it would seem. One of the trickiest things about this method is getting colors to look right. Since you have to pass everything through red and blue filters, it really changes the balance of color, and you have to, if you want it to look right, you got to do some tweaking. This is not trivial, and I don't think they knew anything about this in this movie. A bunch of the scenes are extremely dark. You can barely see what's going on. The colors look strange in a bunch of scenes. The skin color is all over the place. The color between 2 shots in the same scene will be completely mismatched. It's not great. There are some moments where the 3D effect actually works, but these moments tend to be gimmicky, like someone holding a rat right up to the camera. Even good 3D films, honestly, struggle a little bit with gimmicks. On the other hand, many of the scenes in the movie aren't really staged with much depth and don't make use of the 3D. There's also a lot of scenes where the 3D effect just doesn't work at all. At least it didn't for me. Maybe my eyes are too close together or far apart or something, or maybe I wasn't the right distance from the screen, or maybe these are just really crappy glasses, or it could be all of them. But my impression is that this was really just a naive attempt at making a 3D movie, which is something that requires expertise to do well. There's more to it than taping 2 cameras together. Anyway, if you don't have 3D glasses, don't worry, you can still watch this movie. You shouldn't, but you could, because I think it is actually a better experience to watch without wearing glasses. The movie will look goofy, but it is going to look bad either way, and at least this way, I don't know. It's not quite so much of a nuisance. That's really all I have to say about Black Lolita, which will probably be the last blaxploitation film I cover for a while. If you're interested in the subject, check out some of my older videos on it. There's quite a few at this point. The Spook Who Sat by the Door is one of the better movies, blaxploitation movies I've reviewed on the channel. Even Black Shampoo, which is pretty shambolic, is miles ahead of Black Lolita. So yeah, don't watch this movie, but the odds that you would do that by accident are pretty slim, so you probably have very little to worry about.